If you would like to earn CPE credit for listening to the show, visit earmarkcpe.com/FPA. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. If you would like to earn continuing education credit for your FP&A certification from the Association of Finance Professionals for listening to the show, go to the show notes for details on how to earn the credit. Finally, if you enjoy listening to FP&A Today, please go to your podcast platform of choice, click the subscribe button, and leave a rating and review of the show. And now, on to the show.
From Data Rails, this is FP&A Today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FP&A Today. I am your host, Paul Barnhurst, aka the FP&A Guy, and you are listening to FP&A Today. FP&A Today is brought to you by Data Rails, financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users. Every week, we welcome a leader from the world of financial planning and analysis and discuss some of the biggest stories and challenges in the world of FP&A. We will provide you with actionable advice about financial planning and analysis. This is going to be your go-to resource for everything FP&A. I am thrilled to welcome today's guest on the show, Danielle Stein Fairhust. Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, super excited to have you. So just a little bit of Danielle's background, and then I'll let her tell us a little bit more about herself. But she comes to us from Sydney, Australia.
Yes.
She did her undergrad and MBA in business, and she also earned the Chartered Financial Modeling Certificate from the Financial Modeling Institute. She currently runs her own business called Plum Solutions and is the founder of Women in Financial Modeling Online. It's a meetup community. In 2021, she earned the prestigious Microsoft Most Valuable Professional Award. And she also earned this last year a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Financial Modeling Summit. And then more recently, she launched her a financial modeling course on LinkedIn. So, she has a ton of great experience and we're super excited to have her. So Daniela, maybe you could start by just telling us a little bit about your background and how you ended up where you're at today.
Yeah. I've got to say, I didn't start out thinking, hey, I'm going to be a financial modeler for the rest of my life. But I tell you, I must say, I didn't even know what a financial modeler was when I first graduated. But it was just something that I got into and found that I really, really loved it. So I started out in investment banking. So you may know that most young Australians go off traveling. And as I did, and I was gone for about 7 years, and I ended up in the UK and started in investment banking then, and first started as an analyst there and, started using Excel, and I just never looked back. I absolutely loved it. And when I came back to Australia, I was, just working in just with using Excel and in finance and, worked in a number of different roles. And I always knew that I wanted to start a business. It was just something that I'd always wanted to do. And so I decided to build the business around myself and the skills that I had, because I could see how in demand those skills were. So that's kind of how it came about.
Great. So you started investment banking, you said UK. Is that where you started kind of the career and then came back to Australia?
Yes.
So what particularly was it, that interested you so much in kind of financial modeling in Excel? What drew you to that within kind of the finance realm?
It was the idea that it was something that I found, I just really enjoyed it. It was just, it's very structured. It's very technical, but it's also quite creative. So there were lots of things about it that drew me to it. And also the fact, I think, that it's quite hard, or it's perceived to be difficult. And it certainly can be very difficult, but it's the sort of thing that most people find hard to do, and it's very much in demand. And so that's kind of why I started. First of all, I started doing it, or sort of, leasing out my skills in that area, and then found that there was a real demand for people to learn how to do this. And at that time, there was no financial modeling training in Sydney, and I started a little course and kind of never looked back from there because I just really enjoyed teaching as well as consulting. And that's pretty much all I've been doing with the business is to teach and then also to consult. So you're going into a business and helping them with their models, with their forecasts, and actually working on the coalface, and then teaching as well, whether that's in person and more recently, almost exclusively online. And that's just that sort of combination of those varied avenues of income and activity, but all within like I just do financial modeling with Excel, and I don't use other software. And I don't really go outside. I don't need to go outside that because it's just such a huge area, and there does seem to be such a high demand for those skills.
Yeah. So when you said you don't go outside Excel, I think this will make you laugh. The other day I put on LinkedIn, I said, in 3 words or less, describe what you would do if Excel ceased to exist tomorrow.
Oh,
And there were multiple people that would cry. And I
yeah.
just kind of had a laugh,
I
because
missed that.
yeah, it was pretty funny. I think I had about 100 responses from
I
people.
bet.
There were some creative ones, but there were quite a few that cry. One was like, well, I'm going to short Microsoft stock. Yeah. So
Yeah. I mean, what would we do without Excel? And it's, ever since I started, people are, oh, Excel is dead. There's going to be something so much better than Excel. But of course there's not. Of course we all just using Excel all the time. And it's just something that I just can't imagine a world without Excel for sure.
no, I agree with you. It's really, we've all heard it, right? The Excel is dead. They did that for a couple decades, and it's still the most popular software. And pretty much any software that does any numbers, finance, has an export to Excel button, right? As I like to say, it's the most
Absolutely.
common feature in any software.
Yep. How do I get this into Excel so that I can actually get my hands on it and turn it into something useful so I can actually use it? Mm.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So, you had mentioned, we were kind of chatting that you're partnering with the Global Excel Summit this
Yes.
summer. It looks like to run a public masterclass. You're going to be in London for a few months. I think you said you're doing 2 courses, financial modeling and budgeting and forecasting. Could you talk
Yeah.
maybe a little bit about that?
Yeah. I got to say, that's one of the things that I just love about what I do. It's just, I have so much fun every single day. And one of the things that I absolutely love doing is traveling. And, I love being at home here in my office, here in Sydney, but, having the opportunity to travel is amazing. And, being able to run a masterclass in London in person now that we're able to do that again, is absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to go through, it's a really condensed course. So it's just 1 day on each of the topics. And it's just going to be the best of financial modeling. So just the things that you absolutely need to know about financial modeling. So it's quite hands-on. People bring laptops and they actually build a financial model during the day. They get one of my books. Get both of my books. I think it was is included as well. And then the next day we do budgeting and forecasting. So that's really a bit of both. So it's more about the use of financial modeling in a budgeting and forecasting context. So you're actually looking at what skills you would need to build a budget or a forecast, or being able to, and again, just staying within the confines of Excel, but of course, looking at what's available in terms of, of course, we when I say Excel, I mean that we would look at how to use Power Query and Power BI, because of course that is really part of the Excel Microsoft ecosystem. We can't ignore that for sure.
No, and especially I think if you're doing budgeting and forecasting and you want to update any kind of actuals, Power Query, you should be using it. It
Of
makes it
course.
so much easier. I'm
Yeah.
a huge fan of that. So that makes sense. So I'm curious, just ask a little bit, budgeting and forecasting versus financial modeling. when you mentioned kind of the difference in skills, what do you see kind of as the key difference in need when you're really focused on budgeting and forecasting and you know you're going to be regularly rolling and updating versus maybe building, a kind of a one-time project model or a deal model that isn't something that, you're maybe using for 5 years?
Yeah. And the way I see it is that budgeting forecasting models is a subset of financial modeling, because financial modeling is such a huge skill set, and there's so many, but the skills are transferable across so many different disciplines. So you can build transactional models, you can build M&A models, you can build operational models, just so many different types of financial models. And those types of models that you need to build for budgeting and forecasting are very specific. So there are certain things that you need to be able to use, but the skills that you learn there are applicable across different disciplines and across all of FP&A for sure.
That makes sense. That's kind of figured. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. I know I want to talk a little bit about books. I have one of the two books you've written.
Wow.
So
You
I got
have
that
got
one.
a
I think I
copy.
picked that one about a year ago or so. And so, I know you're really passionate about educating. And so first we'll talk a little bit about the books. You've written two, the one I just showed there. And the other one I believe is Financial Modelings in Excel, one of the Dummies series, right?
But yes, part of Dummies. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe first talk a little bit about why you wrote the books and that experience, if you could.
Oh, again, I mean, it was just something I always wanted to do. I mean, you just want to, who doesn't want to write a book? And when I got the offer from Wiley Finance, I just thought, why not? It's a fantastic thing to do. But of course, Excel keeps changing. And when you write something that is full of screenshots, it has a limited life. And so I've had to, that first book, Using Excel for Business and Financial Modeling, the part of the Wiley Finance series, the one you've got in your hand, that one you've got is the latest edition.
I was just looking. I noticed it says third edition.
Third edition. Yeah. So I've had to do it 3 times. And the Financial Modeling in Excel for Dummies is second edition because, so that's updated for 365. So yeah, it's so much work. And I've got to say, it's great to have done it, and it's such a great thing to have. And it's actually really useful for training, because if you do when I run a training course, to actually give people a copy of the book as part of the training, it's just great for them to have something to refer to. It's like a take home, and they can, they don't have to remember everything. They can, write notes of where the instructional text is for what we've talked about during the course, for sure. But I've got to say, I did have, it was similar, but quite different when I recorded the LinkedIn course, because it's almost similar to writing a book in the way that it was laid out in terms of the modules, and to actually put it together and make it sequential. Almost as much work. But I feel like it's a more dynamic medium. It's similar in that if you make a mistake, or if you change your mind about what you want to say, having to change it is quite difficult. So it's a similar type of thing to writing a book. But I feel like for some people, they learn better through videos. So I think it's good to have both.
I agree. I've written a lot. I haven't written a book, but obviously a lot of content with LinkedIn and different things, and released my first digital course a few months ago. And I know you're talking about, like, there's little things I would change now, but I already have it out. I had it professionally produced. I'm like, I don't want to go back through and re-record it. And because they're minor things, but when you want to correct them, it is just like a book. It's a fair amount of work. So I can appreciate that. So, it's clear you're really passionate about teaching. What is it you love about teaching? What gets you so excited to go into a room, go to a different place, and share about financial modeling?
This is going to sound ridiculous, but I have friends who are, my husband's an architect, and he builds things and he does amazing, amazing structures and things that are so important. You know, I have friends who are doctors or they, have, that saving people's lives and doing the most amazing things. And, I used to, when I first started my career, and I used to think, wow, if I don't get this report out by the end of the day, no one is going to die. Do you know what I mean? And
I do.
it's that lack of impact. I want for every single day, every day that I go to work, I want there to be impact, and every time I do something, I want to reach people and I want to help them and I want to do something that benefits not only me. I mean, I'm going to get, I get paid. That's great. But I want it to be meaningful and it's really important. And when you are teaching, you can see what a difference you're making to people. It's hard online. It's much, much harder to, particularly when people don't turn on their cameras. But
Yes.
but you still know that you're having an impact and you can still tell even without the cameras. But, and there's nothing quite like in-person training and just seeing the impact and seeing how, you can make their lives easier, and how that you can have that kind of reach and really help people. That's what I love about teaching.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've always enjoyed teaching. I worked a lot with youth, for a number of years doing scouting as a leader and things like that.
Really?
Now I do training today and I really
Okay.
enjoy that. And I totally know what you mean. It's more challenging online, especially if nobody has their camera on. So it's hard to tell. Are they getting it? To see the faces, to be able to tell the energy level. When you're in the room, it's so much easier to be like, all right, you see that interaction. You can see them face to face and talk with them. And so I agree with you. There's definitely a difference in training. Most of my training's been remote. I've done a little bit of in person, and there's definitely a difference.
Yeah. You can tell, you can get it like straight away. You're like, oh, I'm losing them because you know exactly where they're at, where they're with you, are they bored, or they're looking at their phone or whatever. It's so much better to be able to really, and you just know, and there's that moment, that hush when you just know that everybody is really getting what you're saying and they're really understanding it. And that's just fantastic.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's, teaching is a great thing. And it's the best is when you made a difference, when you actually hear back from somebody like, hey, I'm using what you taught me. I mean, right. The worst is when you leave and you fear that they're just going to never use what you've taught.
Oh yeah.
Like I've seen that with
And
some
yeah,
organizations where you're like, okay, this is just, they paid me for a day. There's not going to be an impact. And other times you're like, you can tell they're actually going to use it, and so much more rewarding when that's the case.
yeah. One of the best things I started doing was actually, and it's quite ridiculously generous we actually allow people we actually give them 12 months of support after the course, and we allow them to make an appointment like every month. So I open up my calendar, but only for a day or two, and they can different time zones and whatever. And they just book a short call. And it's one of the best things to do. It's so much fun. And it's just so fantastic to get that follow up because they can continue to learn. It's not just that kind of one brain dump of, wow, I learned all this stuff, but to have that check in once a month. And sometimes they might skip a month or they might not always use it, but they know that they can just jump in and help with a formula, or say, I'm thinking about, guidance. I'm having this problem with a colleague or whatever. Like it's almost like a coaching session. And it's lots of fun. It means and it allows me to connect with the people that I've met previously, and you get that continuation of their learning, which I think is fantastic.
No, that's great. And that gives me some ideas, and is very generous. I typically will do, like, we usually have a follow-up kind of Q&A after the training a week or two later.
I used to do that as a group. Yeah. And particularly for the FMI training, we would do, prior to the exam, we would do group webinars and group sessions. And I actually found that people were silent and
That's what I'm
they
finding.
would they just wanted the recording. They often would register, but they wouldn't turn up live, and they would watch the recording, but they don't get much out of it because it's just about me pushing, me talking, me generating the content for them. And they were just listening, whereas it's better if it's an interactive session. So we found that doing them one-on-one and just keeping them short was far more effective, because people then have to think about, what is it that I need to know? What questions do I have? We just found that better than doing a group. I mean, obviously it wouldn't work if I don't have hundreds of students, all at once. At any one time, we probably only have, 100 or a couple of hundred students going through. So it's not, I'm not completely, overwhelmed with people.
Thanks for sharing. I appreciate that. So I'm going to move on here a little bit. In finance and financial modeling, we see a lot more men than women in general. And I remember on LinkedIn, I'd actually shared a quote from your book, and I talked about financial modeling, and then I tagged a bunch of men. And I really appreciated you came back and said, what about the woman on the, like, you didn't even mention me, and I'm the author. And I remember thinking, man, I really messed up here.
You quoted from the
Yes,
book.
I quoted you. Yes, I quoted a line of what a financial model was, how you defined it, because I really liked it. And I'd mentioned it was from you, but I didn't tag you in the post. And you'd found it, and you'd been like, wait, you've tagged like 8 men here, and the author is a woman. Like, why did you do this? And I was like, and you were really nice about it.
Okay,
but that really hit home for me. Yes, you were very polite, but it just reminded me of the importance of, making sure we're being diverse and recognizing everybody in the field. And, in financial modeling and in finance in general, we see a lot more men than women. So I know you've been very active in trying to get more women involved. I know you started the Women in, Financial Modeling online meetup community. Can you talk a little bit about kind of why you started that and why that's kind of a passion project of yours?
Yeah. Yeah, I just sort of wanted to try to encourage and to raise the profile of women in our profession, because I think there's plenty of women who work in finance, in FP&A as financial modelers. You just don't necessarily hear from them. And it's just a way of trying to raise their profile, trying to give them a safe space to learn from each other and to get together. And I would love to make it open to men as well, but I find that women don't talk as much. Wouldn't talk as much if it was a mixed group. And at the moment, lately we've only been getting together and we train for the Financial Modelling World Cup. So we've actually got a session tomorrow, early in the morning, our time, which will probably be late for you. And we get together and we go through the cases of what was in the Financial Modelling World Cup and say, wow, what do you think about that question? And, oh, that one was really hard, and, all that sort of stuff. And just kind of talk about the round in general. So, and it just kind of, but sometimes we have interviews, and, just different sort of forums to just talk about issues. I'd love to do more. I think it's a great forum. I just don't have a huge amount of time to do it. I would like to spend more time on it, but it's kind of so that was the reason that I started to do it, just to try to get more women involved and to hear from more women.
You know what it is like. 13 different spreadsheets emailed out to 23 different budget holders. Multiple iterations, version control, errors, back and forth updates. You never really feel in control of the consolidation and collection process. Yep, I've been there. Stop, breathe. DataRels is the financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users. DataRels takes data from all your company's disparate sources. No organization is too complex, consolidating everything into one place, secured in the cloud. Now all your data finally talking to each other. Everything is automated back into your report in Excel. Cash flow, FX conversion, intercompany transactions, now automated and up to date. Drill down and variance analysis in seconds. Don't replace Excel, embrace Excel. Turn your Excel into a lean, mean FP&A machine. Find out more at www.datarails.com.
No, that's great. I'm really glad you did that because I agree with you. You don't hear as much. I mean, I know I can even see that sometimes, when I'm looking for guests, I get a much higher response rate from men than I do women to be
Oh
on the
yeah.
show.
Oh yeah.
And so it's trying to balance that because I'd like more women. I'm always, kind of looking, and it becomes a challenge because I'll spend, I'll reach out to about 3 times as many women as I will men to get people on the show. They're just
Yep.
they tend to be much more comfortable coming on the show.
Yep.
And so I'm grateful when I, can get them on the show because you guys have so much to offer. And I find, there's often a different perspective and, some of the smartest people I've worked with. And so I appreciate you, making that concerted effort to make sure their voice is heard. I think it's important.
Yeah. It is, you do have to work quite hard to make sure that you have equal representation, and it's often in a lot of conferences, they need to really make an effort to make sure that women are submitting because they just don't. And often they sort of put out like a blanket, when they a call for speakers, they would just put out a blanket call for speakers, and a whole lot of men will go, yeah, I'll do it, and I'm probably I'm a bit like that too. I'll kind of like, yeah, I'll talk. Like, hang on, I don't even know what it is I'm talking about, but I'll talk. Yeah, I just love talking. I'm very happy to do that, but that's probably a little bit unusual. And so they have to really sort of go and track down and actually make sure that there are sufficient women that are being invited to speak. So I think it's really important.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, when you reminded me, it's really helped me focus on making sure that diversity, it's become something I'm more conscious of because sometimes you don't even realize it. You just kind of go with the people you mostly work with or know. And sometimes, at different times, they tend to be dominant to one group or another. And so I totally agree with you. Whatever event you're doing, try to be consciously aware of how you can have diverse opinions, right? And it goes much beyond just gender, but that's one thing to consider is, and how do you make sure you're bringing in those different viewpoints and different people from different backgrounds? Because that's how we all learn. It's how we learn the most is having diverse opinions and thoughts and backgrounds and experiences to learn from.
For sure.
So, one other thing I want to ask a little bit is I know you love the mic, as you told me. I know you mentioned you're an announcer on a community radio station. You also do some announcing for Financial Modeling World Cup, Excel Esports. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that experience? What it's like for you to announce that type of event?
Yeah, it's really fun. It's a sort of thing where I think it's because the competitors, it can be quite hard to follow, I think. So the competitors are really fast and we are switching. So it's Excel Esports. Usually there's different types of battles, different times a year. I've been doing it for a couple of years, and they just kind of, it's as a commentator, it's our job to kind of explain what's going on the screen and to kind of make it accessible and interesting for the audience so they can kind of follow perhaps a little of what's going on. If I can follow what's going on, because it's really fast. So they've got, multiple screens going and they're sort of flicking between them, and they're usually solving a question very, very quickly. And it's really, really fun because, we don't know what the solution is going to be. So they have one that we did a couple of weeks ago had one question, and each game went for 10 minutes, and we had, I think, 4 competitors. and and multiple rounds of the same game, and we were kind of watching them. We'd seen the competition beforehand and thought about how to solve it. But then when the competitors go and you go, wow, I didn't think of solving it like that. That's a completely different tack. And my co-host and I would go through it in advance and say, well, how would you do it? Yeah, how would you do it? And then the competitors come up with something completely different. And you go, wow, what are they doing? And, this use of dynamic arrays, formulas, or use of a data table or some other type of Power Query or something that you think, wow, I would not have thought of doing it like that. And it's absolutely, it's really kind of edge of your seat kind of stuff because you just don't know what they're going to do. And you're like, wow, that's a formula that I did not expect to see today. And yeah, just seeing how they solve these problems is absolutely amazing and so much fun.
Yeah, I bet. So I have to ask, because I love his voice and, listening to him. Have you had the opportunity to co-host with Oz?
No. I think because we're in different time zones.
That would make sense. I
Yeah,
was just
I have
curious.
actually met him in person, and he's lots of fun. Yes, I love how he commentates for sure. Mm.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his videos. He's just, his storytelling, folks, his style is unique.
Yeah.
And so it's fun. I was just curious on that. All right. So, next question here, I wanted to ask you a little bit. This goes back a little bit about women. Let's say there's someone listening that really wants to get, more involved in financial modeling as a woman. Any advice you would offer, any things that you found has helped you in your career you would offer?
Yeah. If somebody wants to get into financial modeling.
Yeah, in particular, let's say there's a woman who wants to get more active. Maybe they want to get involved, in the World Cup or some of those things. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't say go into the World Cup first off, because it's quite
very competitive.
It's I kind of every time I compete, I go, whoa, it's not exactly an ego booster when you sit the Financial Modeling World Cup.
That's probably why I haven't done it. I've had a few people tell me I should compete, and I'm just like, no, I've seen what they could do, and they'll just wipe the floor with me. Is what I say.
Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't say start there because it's you probably give up. It's not a good place to start, I think. But once you know what you're doing and get some experience. But I would say the best place to start is to just start. Just start using Excel. Give yourself every opportunity to use Excel for financial modeling, for whatever in your work. So if you are working in FP&A, make sure that you are the person that's building the models, get the opportunity to use that, volunteer for these projects and say, hey, I'll do this, and, show the aptitude that you have, particularly when it comes with working with Excel. If you're not working in that kind of role, you can absolutely build models for your own personal investments, for your cash flow, that sort of thing. There are lots of examples online that you can go to. You can have a look at how people build these things and then try to create them. Some of the even on some of the financial model, once you get better at once you get some experience, and have a look at the Financial Modeling World Cup examples, because they will actually give you the solution. It is an absolute bargain, I've got to say, because you sign up for it, and I don't know, it's not terribly expensive, but they will actually, once you've sat for it, even if you bomb, even if you don't do very well at all, you get given the solutions, which is fantastic. So you can actually go through and see exactly how it's not the only way to build it, but it's a way to build it. And it's a great learning experience.
That does sound like a great one. And I like how you said budget, do your own budgeting, whether it's an investment or something. I had on Chris Riley, who's done some courses and teaches financial modeling. And, his advice was model your life, is how he put it. He goes, most of the things I learned about Excel, it was by building my own models for myself, is really how to do it. And so I really kind of like that advice. And, you mentioned some similar things there. And I like, as you continue to advance, look at things like World Cup and learn from others, right? When you see the way others solve it, it gets you thinking about things you wouldn't think of. Like you do your attempt, like you mentioned, watching them, and you're like, wow, I would have never thought of solving something that way. because there's always more than one way, if not 10 different ways to solve something in Excel.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just you do it your way, the way that your brain works. And I have learnt things off people I have never even met, because you look at their models, you take them apart, and you kind of work out how their mind works, which is completely different to your own. And
Mm-hmm.
the design and the way that they lay something out, you go, oh, that's really interesting. And and every model that you build, every model that you take apart is going to make you a better modeler, because you might spend ages nutting through something and going, how did I do that? And then the next time you come across that problem, you'll be able to solve it like that. And you're going to be so much faster at that sort of problem. And you'll be able to take that solution that little bit further. And by doing these sorts of things like preparing for one of the FMI exams, or sitting for the Financial Modelling World Cup, those sorts of things are ways that you can just consistently build your skills so that you'll just become a better modeler, and you'll be so much faster. You'll think of better solutions that you just wouldn't otherwise. And the other thing that is fantastic about these things where you put yourself under pressure, particularly with the Financial Modelling World Cup, you have 2 hours and you have to finish certain cases. There's 3 cases, and it's very few people. I certainly don't get through every single part of the cases. I just kind of do as much as I possibly can in the time. And you're under pressure and it's stressful, and you're, putting yourself in that situation is such good training, because it is low stakes. It doesn't matter. It is, you can be anonymous. You don't even have to have your name up there. And that's what's so fantastic about it. You can just go for it. And then at the end of it, you go, oh, well, I bombed. It doesn't matter. And look at, how I could have done better next time. And then when you are in an interview, or you're in a real situation at work, and you have got to get something done in a certain time frame, and it's got to be right. It's got to be accurate, and it's got to be done quickly. You are going to be so much better at it as a result.
I love that. Great advice. You're making me think that I might have to try out one time if I think my
Yeah.
ego can handle it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is quite ego crushing.
I appreciate you being honest about that. And I have a friend who's a big financial modeler too. And someone's like, you should join this. And he looked at him and goes, I would get clobbered. He's done a few. And,
Yeah.
he
But
mentioned how hard they are.
also remember, it's not real life, and it's about all of these things, the games, the esports. They're just simulated.
Yeah.
And one of the, the problems with the World Cup is that it's about trying to get the answers quickly, and the model that you build is not the sort of model that I would build for a client, because it's single use. It's not repeatable, and it's not properly generally. The solutions that they give you are well structured, but the models that I build when I'm competing are certainly not well structured at all.
Sure. I mean, it's more for the learning, the pressure, the experience,
Mm-hmm.
thinking differently, the logic. It's not like you're going to take what you built there and that's going to be your ideal budgeting and forecasting model that you're going to use for the next couple of years, right? Because you're
Definitely
thinking,
not.
how quickly can I get this done? Which
Uh-huh.
is very different than how can I make this productionalized so it's easy to update and reuse month to month. I totally
Exactly.
agree. Those can be very different logic, and they're both beneficial and they can help each other, but they're just different environments and different ways of thinking when you're doing
Yeah, and I've got to
a
say,
competition versus a
yeah,
work assignment.
that's a really good point. And particularly when it comes to budget models, the reuse of them is just so valuable. Being able to use the same templates, and to be able to have that forecast, like a rolling forecast that you're just going to be able to roll forward. Like, I've had models that the clients come back to me 10 years later, and they say, oh, I've been working this and I've eventually run out of rows and something's broken. And I go, oh my goodness, are you still using that model? That is amazing. And they go, oh yeah, I just changed the model start date and everything just rolls through. And I go, wow, I am doing myself out of a job here because they're just reusing the same models over and over again.
It is pretty amazing how long they can last sometimes. Like, I got an email from someone I worked with, and I've been out of the company for like 2 years, and they're like, yeah, I was just thinking of you because I was watching one of your videos explaining how to, calculate some sales commissions in a commission model I had built. And I was like, well, good luck. Like, I guess you're still using it, so it must work.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Excel is that I look sometimes back at these old models that I built and I go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did it like that. Like, why wouldn't I have used a dynamic array? Because we didn't have dynamic arrays back then. And I just want to go through and completely rebuild it and going, it works. It works. And the thing is that the old features still work generally. But we know that there's a more efficient way of building it now.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I look at things I did, 10 years ago, and I'm just like, what was I thinking? Like, this is, you feel like, yeah, exactly. You want to just jump in and rebuild it because you're like, this is so inefficient. And some of
Yeah.
it's because you've learned more, and some's because the software's
Yes.
changed. Like dynamic arrays is a prime example.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next question here. I know in 2021, you first earned the MVP, the most valuable professional from Microsoft. And then last year, as we mentioned, you'd earned the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Financial Modeling Summit. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what that was like? Those experiences of being recognized that way.
Yeah, amazing. Well, the MVP thing is an annual award.
Yes.
So you get the award for the work that you do in the community, and it's not for any kind of work. It should be for something that you do just to basically as an ambassador for the product, and it's which is really easy to do because we all love Excel and we just go on about Excel all the time, and it's really to recognize people who are really spreading the word about Microsoft Excel. And we get the opportunity to give feedback to Microsoft about the products and that sort of thing. We get to go to the summit, which I haven't actually been to yet because it's was online, and would love to do that if I am a continue to be an MVP next year. If you have to do a certain amount of activity within the community to stay an MVP, which is great. It's a fantastic thing to be, and gives you a lot of great access to Microsoft, and you just get to talk about what you love, which is using Excel. And the Lifetime Achievement Award was amazing. Like, I was really not expecting that at all. So it was quite an honor.
Well, congratulations. No, that is a big honor, and it just shows the great work you've done. I mean, I've been following you for a few years on LinkedIn. I've watched a few videos on your website around financial modeling, and I've been aware of the great work you're doing for a while now. So I think it's definitely well-deserved. So congratulations on that. And, next question I want to ask a little bit here on is Financial Modeling Institute. I know you've been involved a little bit of that. You have a course related to that. So maybe can you talk a little bit of, your experience working with that organization and also taking the tests? Just maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So it's really the only kind of practical qualification for financial modelers. So it's just, there's lots and lots. When it first came out, I was just thought, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to do a test to prove that I'm a financial modeler. I know I'm a financial modeler. I don't need to prove it. And, and I didn't do it at first. And then I went, actually, it's pretty cool to have that, and that way people know if you have that qualification, people know it is such a high standard, and it's quite difficult. So, it's, anyone who has that qualification, that they can be the level 1, the advanced financial modeler, the AFM. You have to build a 3-statement model. So an income statement, a cash flow, and a balance sheet within 4 hours. And, getting it getting the whole thing built and fully working. So you know that anyone who has that qualification can do that. So they're a reasonable modeler. Level 2 is a whole lot of different types of models and problems and solutions. So there's a couple of different, you can choose a few different models to build for that. And then there is a level 3, which is coming, I believe.
Yeah, that's my understanding is that one's coming. Well, congratulations on that. And like, it's something I've wanted to sit for that I have in the future. COVID kind of delayed that, but I'm getting
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
So,
I'm sure
so
you.
next
Yeah, I
question.
mean, I think for someone who already has the basics of financial statements, I don't think it would be that much. It's certainly not, massive amount of work. But you do need to prepare and you do need to rehearse, and that was the reason why I set up an on-demand prep course so that people to take people through the course and just to try, because it's the sort of thing that is quite rehearsable. So it's quite easy to train someone to do it because it is literally the three statements are always different, of course, different companies, different numbers, but the format and the layout and what you need to build is almost exactly the same for every exam. So that was why I wanted to build something that would help people to pass that exam.
No, totally makes sense. And that's what I've seen in studying it. And, the biggest thing for me is all my experience are primarily has been with large companies, and you're not building three statement models. So I didn't do my first three statement model for work till about 2, 3 years ago. Yeah. Oh, and the first one I did was for a client, and yeah, it took me about 4 hours to find out why my balance sheet wouldn't balance, and I could kick myself when I was done. But I was able to build the whole model because the P&L, the revenue, all that stuff was easy. The head count. For me, the time was spent on making sure my schedules are right and stuff ties, because I understood the statements. I get
The
how they
schedules is,
link, and
yeah,
it was those type of things. And so I think it's great I wish everybody had to start with that core of really understanding and being able to build that integrated three statement, because I think it provides a very solid foundation. Even if you're in the type of role where you're not going to use it like mine, I'm forecasting for American Express. I'm not going to be forecasting the balance sheet. I'm doing P&L and revenue and headcount and those type of things. Because like you said, there's a lot of different areas you can get into when it comes to financial modeling.
for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it is something that, every modeler needs to have those skills.
So I'm curious to get your take. I recently had Inshoner on the podcast. I know you had listened to that episode and shared some things about it. One of the things he mentioned, he said, far and away, the biggest problem with financial models is design. And so I'm curious, what's your take on that? Do you agree that that tends to be the biggest problem with financial models, or do you think it's something else?
Oh, yeah. It's I do agree. Absolutely, I agreed with a lot of things that Ian Shaw says. Which, yes, I definitely would say that a design is often a big problem. I don't know whether it's necessarily, there are lots and lots of problems with the way that people build models. I think probably, just so many different issues with the way the models that, when you inherit somebody else's models and you have to look through them and think, oh my gosh. Yes. And design is certainly often a really big problem with the models that you inherit from someone else, just being able to follow them and what the heck, and, just trying to figure out how the model works, how it flows, how it actually hangs together is often a very big issue. But probably, I think errors is something that's very concerning. If you're not, as a modeler, if you are not constantly, vigilantly searching for errors, you have a problem, because there will be, like, without fail, there will be errors in your model. So just having that constant vigilance. So errors, building in error checks, people not building models efficiently, having models that are too big and slow and inefficient in how they're hang together, which I guess, yes, that is design, actually not just being really slow and repetitive. And that's a real issue with the models.
I totally agree as far as size. I once inherited a model that was 1.3 gigabytes.
Ooh.
Yes. And, the person's like, yeah, it opens pretty quick on my 64 gig machine. Like, okay, if you need a 64 gig machine to open your Excel file, you got bigger problems.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that was the largest I've ever dealt with. And there were some definite design issues. Number one being Excel is not a large database. Would be
No.
the first issue.
Yeah, and we often have the model, the data sitting within the model, and it just really slows things down and clogs it up. Mm.
Yeah, exactly. So, I know our time's coming up here, so we're going to move into, kind of final phase here. Just a little more personal questions that we ask everybody as we wrap up. So the first one we like to ask all our audience is, what's something unique you can tell us about yourself? Something we wouldn't find online about you.
Oh gosh. I did when I did my undergraduate, I actually majored in Korean language, and I learned to speak Korean reasonably fluently. And I lived in Korea for 3 years after I graduated, and to this day do not use that skill at all. So being able to speak Korean is really not that useful. Although I did actually go to a little town in the south of Korea just a couple of years ago to do an FMI exam, which was lots of fun, and I did actually get to use my Korean language. But that's probably not something you would know about me.
Yeah, I definitely will say that's one I didn't know. Had no idea. That's cool. So thank you for sharing that one. Next one. This is one of my favorite questions to ask everybody is, what's your favorite thing about Excel? Formula, feature, do you have favorite kind of function?
Oh my gosh, how can I answer that? That is completely impossible. It's like asking me to choose between my children. I mean,
How did I know something like that was coming?
How could I say? Oh, there's just so many fantastic features. There's so many of the functions I couldn't live without. And it's always amazing when something's only been around for, a year or so. And I can't believe, how did I ever live without this? Like the sequence function, for example, the unique function. I've not been using it that long. And then all of a sudden it just becomes part of your repertoire and you just can't imagine life without it. And then, when I was in Cairo recently, I had to run a course they were using 2019, which is not 365.
Yeah.
So we had to use basically we couldn't use XLOOKUP. We had to go with VLOOKUPs, and just having to go back and live without those features was quite a challenge.
Yeah, I recently did a training for a company that wasn't on 365, and all the formulas because usually I introduce a lot of people to XLOOKUP, unique, those type of things, and I all of a sudden had to be like, oh wait, I can't I got to change my course here.
Yeah.
So I could relate to that one. So is there a kind of a favorite one you've been learning about recently? Like any kind of, recent kind of new formula that you've really enjoyed? You mentioned sequence unique, any of the other kind of new dynamic arrays or text formulas they've come out with in the last year?
Yeah. I got to say, I found when the filter function first came out, I did find it a little bit tricky to find just to kind of, it's just not exactly intuitive. So I try to use that one all the time because you just want it to just roll off the fingers, don't you? You just want to be able to use it very quickly, because I still always find it a little bit difficult. And just when the new functions come out, to try to make sure that you're using them and finding uses for them, but not if the client is not using 365. That's something you're always having to remember.
Yeah, totally agree. It's a big thing to remember. So thank you for sharing that. And filter's a fun one, but it does take a while to get used to. It's a different logic for it. So it's taken me a little while to get used to that. So, next question here, and then we'll have one final question as we wrap up, is if someone was starting a career today, say they were working in, FP&A, so they're going to be doing obviously a lot of budgeting and forecasting, any advice you'd offer somebody starting a career today?
Learn Excel. Yeah, just making sure that you have really, especially for people starting their career, because it is not going anywhere. These are skills that you are going to have right throughout your career. It's something that it's highly unlikely that wherever you, particularly if you're working in FP&A, but in any kind of office environment, I mean, it's very unusual. It's unusual for people not to need to use Excel and to have those skills. And having good Excel skills right at the beginning of your career is something that you're going to use right throughout it. So definitely just getting to grips with Excel and staying up with all the new features is a really good skill to have.
Totally agree. Great advice there. I mean, learning that, especially early in your career when you're using it every day and often most of the day. So great advice. So last question, if someone wants to get a hold of you to learn more about you and what you do, what's the best way to do that?
Oh, well, I just, like you, I just hang out on LinkedIn. That's kind of where I am all the time. So that's probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Great. And we'll make sure to include that in the show notes so people can reach out there. We'll also put your website. But thank you so much, Daniela, for the time. I really enjoyed getting to talk with you. Appreciated it. And look forward to continuing to learn from you on LinkedIn and see all the great content and things you're coming out with. So thanks for making some time for us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. And thank you for the fantastic podcast. I do really enjoy listening to it every week.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. You have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.